Hi, my name is Bob Bazans, and I'm an alcoholic. The grace of God and the help of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have not found it necessary to take a drink since the 10th of December, 1967, and for that I'm very grateful. I am so I'm about 3 weeks short of my 25th anniversary. Coveney's about 6 weeks short of his 30th anniversary. There's always someone around who's got much more time than you have. It kind of, and it is. But I tell you, it's a wonderful feeling to have people around who have more time than you have. I have a couple of times been to AA events where they have those countdowns, and once or twice I've ended up being the last one standing, and I really don't like that. I've always kind of enjoyed being around the older members of AA, and I wish and hope that all of us hang in there and keep participating and keep contributing, because we keep talking about the younger people being the lifeblood of AA too, but it's nice to have that connection with the roots of our program and the people who have been around a long time. Congratulations on your anniversary. This is quite a deal that you can invite people from all over the United States and gather together, and pretty nice facility that you have here. I'm kind of jealous. We break up into 13 rooms in a church, and we have to spread, all over. To be kind of nice to be able to start our meeting like this and then go on out. So I'm pretty impressed. I want to thank Dan for his hospitality, it's really nice being here. I think Atlanta is a beautiful area. Every time I come here, I'm increasingly more and more impressed. I'm from Minnesota. When I grew up, we thought we had all the pine trees in the world. And it's obvious we've been told falsehoods as I've traveled. It's only one of many things that I've been told as a youngster that have turned out to be not so. And it's a sad and disappointing process. Who was it, Tim up here earlier, and he was talking about all the gentleness and the kindness of the alcohol. He said, if you're all alcoholics, my wife wanted to know who the hell they were talking about. Over here. She's 25 years in Al-Anon. She's become cynical. You go through little phases like that and do that. So it's nice also to be honored. We had friends of ours that were up in Minnesota and moved down here to Atlanta, so we have a chance to kind of reunite and connect. So, done with that. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it was like for me and what happened and what it's like today. I'll set my watch. Doesn't mean anything, but set it now, so I won't get anybody in trouble. I took my first drink when I was 13 years old. That was a big deal for me. It was a big deal for me because I was an insecure kid. I was 4'11", weighed 95 pounds. I was the second smallest kid in my high school class. I was always a kid in grade school. I was always in trouble. I got thrown out of grade school, not for long periods, for days, 25, 30, 40 times. Got at my desk in the principal's office. I was always in trouble. I have two children now that are attention deficit, and I think if you go back, I was attention deficit, just antsy. I was always in trouble, mostly for talking and eating and screwing around. And got out of high school, got out of grade school, went to a military high school. We were on a college campus. There was a hell of a lot of drinking at the high school. We had fraternities. And when I took my first drink, my life changed. I was a guy who was always trying to fit in, and the way I fit in was to be the class clown. I was the guy who would do something that was daring that no one else would do. I was always trying to be a member of the in-group. There's always a group of people who seem to know more about the business of living than you do. They're cool. And I wanted to be cool, so I, sold out and tried to join the group. And, but even after you get there, you don't feel like you belong. You feel like you're there because you're acting a certain way, and if you stop being that way, they wouldn't want you. And one night, a friend of mine had a fifth, and he and I split that fifth, and my life changed. It was as if I discovered the secret. I literally felt in most of my life, and sometimes still do, like everybody else got to school an hour early and had a meeting and discussed what was going to happen for the day. And you showed up. You knew they had the meeting. You had no idea what they discussed, and everybody else knew except you. And then your job was to kind of hang out and pretend like you had been at the meeting. Wasn't that meeting cool? Gee, didn't they all have, what do you think about, what they said? And try to figure out what was said at the meeting and catch up. And that's how I felt a lot of my life. But when I took my first drink, I caught up. I was right out there. I felt funnier, more part of. I was able to move with girls and boys with a sense of ease. It just changed. From that moment on, I became a social drinker. Anytime anybody else said, I'll have a drink, I said, so shall I. Just never, ever passed up an opportunity after that. By the time I finished high school, my drinking problem was a largest subject of negative conversation in my home. I come from a neat home, one of 7 kids, got a great mom and dad. But we had good genetics for alcoholism. I didn't think I was an alcoholic. I thought, when you're underage, it didn't matter if you had 1 drink or 20 drinks. It was illegal and you were in trouble. If you got caught by the cops having a couple of drinks when you were a kid my age, you were in deep doo-doo. And I got caught by the cops. I got caught by my parents. I got caught all the time. And I thought I had kind of bad luck. Didn't think I drank differently than my friends. I drank similarly to my friends, but 4 of my 5 best friends are in Alcoholics Anonymous today, so that is, the other guy's an Al-Anon. He just had to. And we have 2 spouses. It's interesting. 2 spouses that are in AA too, so we were, and most of us have been friends. We've been 6 or 7 years old, so we didn't pick each other because we drank. So it's really kind of a high occurrence of. My high school class was 125 members. There's 15 of us so far that I know that are members of AA. So we're, pretty pregnated with the disease. So I had a chance to go away to school. And I thought, if I go away to school, I'll get away from all this authority and I'll be treated like an adult. And I went away to the University of Notre Dame. Didn't work. My drinking didn't become normal. I continued to get in trouble. I was down there last week. I had to go down to South Bend, Indiana and give an AA talk. And I was walking the campus. And I've been down twice. I hadn't been back. Notre Dame was not a great experience for me. I mean, it was a privilege for me to go there. It was a great school, and I screwed it up. So it was always one of those questions when someone asked you. Then I went home and finished school. So someone said, "Where did you go to school?" Well, you never know what to answer. When an alcoholic has those long pauses, you never. It isn't that you aren't willing to answer the question. The question, how much do you want to tell the person? Simple question. They don't give a damn anyway. It's just a social question. But it was not a social question for me. It was an unfinished piece of business. As long as it's an unfinished piece of business, it's a big damn deal. You ask an alcoholic a normal question, you get a part like, "Are you married?" And they get this kind of confused look on their face. And people don't know. Do you have children? And they kind of never quite sure. Do you work? Just simple little things that are kind of. And it's funny, I went down there last week, and I went to the airport, and no one picked me up. I've been having kind of unusual luck lately when I take these AA trips. So I waited for a half hour, called Linda, got the name of the woman who was supposed to meet me, called her house, she was gone, and some guy came out and picked me up. Now, there was another couple walking around with a sign saying Uncle Bob, and I thought, they must be screwed up. They're looking for me. I went over to them, and they weren't looking for me. They're looking for a guy 90 years old. Because they had a family funeral. The AAs came out and picked up this guy 90 years old. Scouts honor, I promise you, Scouts honor. Walked up to this 90-year-old guy and said, "Are you a friend of Bill's?" The guy said, "Yeah." Put him in the car and took him to the banquet. The guy ordered a bourbon at the banquet. They started to get a sense like this, there must be, something's a little wrong, Now, one of the 2 guys has heard me talk before. I could never figure out, or had a tape. I could never quite figure out why they think maybe I was 90, although I'm moving on in life. But Notre Dame, I relived a lot of memories. I walked the campus that afternoon. It was good for me. When I used to go down, when I went down there before, my son wanted to go to school there, and I went down, Linda and I went down for an interview. Before I went up back on that campus, I just didn't want to be there. I mean, it had a lot of, and then I walked around and looked at how young people were and how young I was when I was there and how many things I never even tuned into and noticed. And I was out to lunch. I mean, I was alcoholic from the moment I stepped on that campus. By the time I got done with school, I was going to school 1 day out of 2 weeks. I was one day in the middle of my senior year, I just quit. God, I was in the yearbook. I had my class ring. I mean, I was ready to go, and I just couldn't handle it. I was in civil engineering, going to school 1 day a week, and you get to the point where you can't bluff your way through a thermodynamics exam. There's no way to. Even an alcoholic's going to have trouble with that. They put the blue book in front of you. And when I quit, I was due to be commissioned as an officer that summer, and I had to get a medical release. The medical release I got was for alcoholism. I was diagnosed an alcoholic at age 19, and I thought that was nuts. I mean, we talk about psychiatrists not being very good at diagnosing alcoholism. I ran into one in 1962 that diagnosed me an alcoholic. Knew a lot about alcoholism. And I thought that was crazy, but it got me out of the service, and I thought that was okay. And I came back home, finished school at a local college, and about the time I finished school, the family asked me to leave home. They said, "Look, we love you and we care about you, but you're a mess. You can't follow the rules. The other kids in the family, are always upset because you're in trouble, and, we're always fighting, and good luck. And armed with my college degree and my newfound freedom, I struck out to make my mark. I took a position as a carry-out boy in a liquor store. Had kind of I almost killed a little girl backing out of a driveway with that truck. I lost that job for going 80 miles an hour with it. Ended up working as a waiter at a club over in Minneapolis, and I'm living on Skid Row. No, I'm not living on Skid Row, but I've got no place to live. I've got an apartment over in St. Paul, 6 miles away. I'm working downtown Minneapolis. I had that job about 4 months. I think I made it home to my apartment 3 days. I had 2 bags of clothes, in my locker over there, and I just slept around. I slept with waiters, waitresses. I had, Dr. Seuss, the children author. Those were actual photographs of people I lived with during that period of time. We had one night I was at a party and I got my face kicked in pretty good, and they fired me as a waiter because the way I wouldn't want me back on the floor working as a waiter, and I had no place to go. And I went back home. When you have no place to go, home's where I thought my mom must miss me. She hasn't seen me in a couple of months. And I went back and I asked if I could move back in. And they said, yeah, you can move back in if you promise not to, they gave me 3 or 4 things that I promised not to do. And like a good little drunk, I promised to follow the rules. I went back to the house. And, alcoholism meant a lot of different things to me. But maybe what it meant more than anything else is I had to start my life over about every 6 months. Anybody in this room that's an alcoholic or married or in love with an alcoholic who's been drinking knows about starting over. I mean, we're great starters and we're poor finishers. And I thought if I could order my life, structure my life, change pieces in it, I could get it back on track. If I could find a woman that I loved, she loved me, we got married, and I get some structure because I was obviously not a self-starter. If I could get out of the house, which is interesting because I was just moving back in the house, and if I could get a job that was, kind of a career sort of thing. So I got that together with Linda. Linda, would you stand up for a second? That's Linda. And we had gone for a couple of years and broken up with for almost a year. We became engaged, we married, and Linda's a very active member of Al-Anon and a lovely lady. And we were a little confused in those days, but we were in love, so that was a pretty good combination. And we became engaged and married. I got my first job as an executive trainee in a manufacturing concern. I bought my first car. I thought, hey, it's going to be okay. Only it wasn't okay because I didn't know exactly what the problem was. I continued to drink and have problems. In big corporations, they're tough places for alcoholics, and, they've got rules. They like to have you come in on Mondays and stay on Fridays, and they got lunch hours, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I was in trouble with that corporation, within 2 months. I mean, I'm using up my sick leave, and I'm late, and I'm in trouble, and now I'm the company drunk. Used to be the class drunk. I had 5 guys in Notre Dame petition to have me removed from the Civil Engineering Society. And now all of a sudden I'm the company drunk. And it's just, no matter where I go, I'm just in trouble and everybody thinks it's my drinking. I had a sense that I better get the hell out of that company, and I got out of the company. I took a job selling. I thought that flexibility would make me less obvious. And I had that job for, a couple of months. And I went on about a 4-day drunk. The first couple of days I called in, the next couple of days I didn't call in. And I woke up one afternoon after about a 10-hour blackout the night before, and I was in trouble. And I didn't know if I had a job, a fiancé, or a place to live. And all of a sudden, I was just panicked. And I woke up, and all of a sudden the recommendation of my father and my psychiatrist that I look into Alcoholics Anonymous didn't seem impossible that afternoon, and I called AA. I got an old-timer down at the central office, and I've been thinking a lot about that. When you come up on anniversaries, you think an awful lot about, you think back. And I've been thinking back about, I wish that man were still alive that I got on the phone. He died, but he died with 30 years of sobriety, and he was a neat old guy. So 2 got on the line, and he called someone else, and he lined up 2 guys to come out and see me at a cafe, and gave me the number of the cafe. And I hung up the telephone, and I got in my car, and I'm in a suit that I've been in 4 days, and I'm a little damp, and I'm scared. I called into work and found out I was still working, and called home and found out that my parents were concerned about me, and called Linda and found out I was still engaged. So things were, a little better than I thought they were. I started to think that maybe I didn't have to go meet those 2 guys. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to go see what an alcoholic looked like. And I really did. There's delusion. What does an alcoholic look like? And I went to a cafe and I sat down with two men. One man had 5.5 years of sobriety, and one man had 6 months of sobriety. And that man with 5.5 years just took a 30, maybe not even 5.5, just took a 30-year pin, and he'll be at dinner with me, I think, next Thursday night. The other man drank after about 8 years, and he's back sober, and he's got about 15 years of sobriety. Those men sat me down in the booth, and my life changed. There's a lot of traditions that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the ones that I think I treasure as much as any is that we share our experience, strength, and hope. We don't share our ideas. There's something that happens when you share your life with someone that's different than sharing your ideas with someone. And they sat me down and they told me their story. They told me what their drinking was like, what had happened to them, what they were like today. And they did that well enough and honestly enough that when they asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting of AA, I did. I said I did, and I went out that night. I went to my first meeting of AA. I made two discoveries very early on in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I think changed my life and allowed me to stay in AA. And I drank twice after walking in the front doors of AA, once on a business trip to the West Coast. I was told to call AA and didn't, and told people I had a bet and got drunk, and then I stayed sober about 3 months, and Linda and I were married. I drank on our honeymoon. I think I had that planned kind of all the way. Couldn't see myself sober in our honeymoon. We honeymooned in Acapulco. You know where the divers dive off those cliffs? I dove off those cliffs on my last drunk. I was in the audience watching a world's high diving contest. I thought, God, that's not so tough. And I had about 9 planters punches and went over and introduced myself to the ex-president of Mexico, and that was real classy. He didn't seem as pleased as I thought. I went to school with his nephew was my roommate at Notre Dame, and I just wanted to, the guards are trying to push me out of the way, and the ugly American routine, climbed down the public landing, climbed up the cliff, split my swimsuit, cut my leg. It's not, if you're picturing something very graceful, it was not graceful. Stood up on top of the cliff at about 85 or 90 feet and couldn't move up, couldn't get down, and God watch it after fools and drunk because I dove and I made it. And if I would have jumped when I was, didn't know what to do, dive or jump, would have died. You can't get out far enough jumping. You have to get out about 35 feet horizontal. And I was, kind of eyeballing. I said, screw it, I'll dive. It's a good decision, Bill. I said to my wife one time, I said, boy, that's the dumbest thing I ever did. And she said, honey, it's not even in the top 10. She has a different view of my life. I don't know. We're both kind of going along side by side, but she has a very different view of it. I had my last drink in the airplane on the way home. 2 discoveries I made which changed my life in AA were these. Number 1, alcoholism is a disease. You say, well, hell, everybody knows that. Well, I didn't know it. I thought alcoholism was something that just happened to you when you drank so damn much you couldn't function. They told me that alcoholism was a disease that affected me as a total person. It was physical, but it was also mental and spiritual. And once I crossed the line from problem drinking into alcoholism, my alcoholism affected me all the time, when I was drinking and when I was not drinking. That was really an important thing for me to find out that there was a mental or emotional or psychological aspect of the disease of alcoholism. Because I had a lot of, I felt I had a few screws loose and, felt like if you knew everything about me, you wouldn't think I was just an alcoholic. For some reason, to me, alcoholic seemed that what's wrong with you is alcohol. And I had some problems with alcohol, but that didn't seem to be what was wrong with me. Clancy talks an awful lot about the complexity of that. And, but they told me that that wasn't all that was wrong with me. And they said, what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous is once we take our last drink of alcohol, we use the 12 steps of the recovery program of AA to find a different way to live. A different way to live that's sufficiently better than the way we lived before so that we don't have to go back to drugs or alcohol to do something for us that we're unwilling or unable to do for ourselves. And if we don't find another way to live, we're going to go back to drinking and using because we don't know how to live without it. I don't think I've ever been told a truer thing than that when I walked into AA. The other discovery I made is that there's an awful lot of people in that room who had drunk a lot of booze and taken a lot of drugs, and now they weren't doing it. And the only reason for them not doing it is they like what they found in sobriety better than what they found in a bottle. And it had occurred to me that I might have to quit, but I thought my life was over. I thought it was just going to be one dull period of time. Drinking was just so much part of my identity and so much part of my action. I didn't hang around with people who didn't drink, but I listened to your stories, and you were out there going at it pretty hard. Most of you longer and harder than I had, some of you not as long and as hard. You got to a point where it didn't work and you had to quit. And it was clear to me your lives weren't over. There was a vitality and an energy and a joy about you that I liked from the moment I walked into AA, and I'm glad that I was able to stay. It was kind of funny and getting warm. When I came in AA 25 years ago, kind of a typical talk, a person would start with their first drink and end with their last drink. And many of them, not everybody, but that was most people. And you never heard much about what happened to them after they got sober. It was very clear that a miracle had to happen in their life for them to be sober. If you listened to their story, I mean, you'd be very clear that, you know, something big had to happen. You could tell by the quality of how they told their story that obviously many of them had happy lives and their wives and stuff, but you never learn much about the detail of their lives. Today, when someone comes into Alcoholics Anonymous and someone says, and then I quit drinking, people want to know, and then what? Because people are coming in at 15 years old and 17 years old and 20 years old and 25 years old, and they don't need to know anything more about drinking. They don't need to know anything more about using. They know all they want to know about that. But they do have an idea about what happens, because if they are able to hang around Alcoholics Anonymous and put their lives back together, they're going to be sober 40 and 50 years. They'd like to know about what's the adventure of recovery. So I'm going to talk the remaining period of time in my talk about what's happened to me in recovery. And that's kind of where the action is. You know, it really is life. It wasn't just marching off into the sunset. My story is kind of disgusting because I even had stories, you know, I even had problems and issues in recovery. It's kind of so. Those of you that don't like life, you can leave now. It's kind of funny, though. My attitude when I came to AA, and I think it was a kind of a hangover from my church upbringing, is I thought that if you would have asked me to define recovery, I would have defined it as the absence of problems. Goofy, but I would have defined it as the absence of problems. If you would have asked me what a good Christian was, I would have kind of defined it as the absence of sin. You know, I think that was the idea growing up. Here are the rules. If you're a good person, you follow the rules, there's no problem. Come to Alcoholics Anonymous, if you take the steps and clean your life up. And it seemed to me that other people who had been around a while didn't have problems. Now, the reason that seemed to me is because I was so goddamn self-centered I couldn't see them. You know, I had my... You know, if I would trade places with you, you didn't have a problem. So if you had a car that was paid for and a house and a job that you'd had for 4 or 5 years and that sort of thing, if I, you know, and I kind of focused on only the people that I wanted to focus on, there were people that were having more problems than I was having, and I was paying attention to the ones who were having less problems. And it seemed like those people didn't have any problems compared to me. I traded with them. So I kind of got this idea that I'm going to come into Alcoholics Anonymous. If I got the problem, you got the answer. If I got the problem and you got the answer, there are about 4 or 5 other things that are going on in my life that are driving me nuts. And if I got the problem and you got the answer, those 4 or 5 things ought to go away. And I'll be reasonable. Hell, it might take a year. And my problems didn't go away in a year. They didn't go away in 2 years. They didn't go away in 5 years. So I want to talk a little bit about problems in sobriety. And I don't have enough time to... If it sounds like... I thought my early sobriety was problematic or it wasn't okay. That's not so. My early sobriety was just fine. It's just that when you look back on it, you have a freedom that you don't have when you're going through it. You know, if someone stands up here takes their 1-year cake and they thank you for giving them back their lives, and they stand up here and take their 2-year cake and they tell you how screwed up they were the first year, but now it's, you know, okay. And I'm looking backwards, and there's a freedom when you look backwards, and you can see some things that you can't see when you're right in the middle of the weeds, and this is how I'm looking back at my life. The problems and issues I have were horrible but ordinary. I got sober and I couldn't get up in the morning. I set the alarm clock for 6:45, and God, I'd get up at, 8, 7:45. It's supposed to be at work at 8. It's hard to be at work at 8 if you get up at 7:45. It's not impossible for an alcoholic, but it's difficult. It's kind of, if anybody's going to do it, an alcoholic's going to do it. I had problems with money. I spent $300 to $400 more a month than I made. Now, it's not much now, but in 1967 it was different. And if you do that over a long period of time, I just want to let you know you'll end up in debt. Just in case you're running that one, you don't know where it goes. It's kind of the same way about eating more calories than you consume. There's just the formula, just the way life is, And I had a gambling problem. It was really kind of more like a hobby, or I don't know, it was 4 to 5 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week. And it was really kind of like a second job, but I made $5,000 to $10,000 a year playing backgammon. And that was a serious deal for me. I've always been a gambler. Kind of always supported myself through college. And I had problems being a father. We had 2 young children. And, I had a great father. And still have the same gentleman as my father. And same guy, haven't trained. And my dad was a good dad, but he was an imperfect father. And I wasn't going to make the few mistakes that my dad did. And I did not make the few mistakes he made. I made the few he made and a bunch he never thought of. And I was loud, and I was impatient, I was immature, I was angry, and I was sometimes violent. Not a very good combination for a young father. Linda started, when I first got in Alcoholics Anonymous, she was seeing less of me when I was in AA than she saw of me when we were dating. She started to get a little upset with how active I was in AA, so we used to argue a lot about how active I was. I thought she should be more grateful at how wonderful, she's got a sober husband. A lot of women in those Al-Anon meetings didn't have a sober husband. And she started to wonder if one of the places I was supposed to practice the principles of the program was in our home. I thought, well, God, that's none of your business, honey. You're supposed to... I don't... She had all these questions that I don't know, kind of... And work's an issue for me. Even when I get to work, I'm not sure what to do. I'm 23 years old, 24 years old. And 23 years old and 4 years old don't know a hell of a lot about business, and I didn't know much about business. And so I was kind of all caught up with what am I going to be when I grow up, if I ever grow up, and what am I supposed to be doing right now in this job. And now these issues for me were not annual issues or quarterly issues or monthly issues. These were daily issues. These were in front of my nose every day. I had every one of these issues in my first year of sobriety, and I never noticed them. Never even bothered me. I just came in and went to meetings. It was just, there was enough noise in my head. I could no more. They talk about defects of character, and I'd say, defects of character? I wonder what the hell a defect of character I was a walking defect of character. If someone could have said, you want to know what a defect is? Bob. Like definitive, And but I just was so scrambled that I just didn't, I just came in, I loved AA, I was on a honeymoon for about 9 or 10 months, and then I started to get in touch with the problems and issues. And one by one, it doesn't seem like they get handed to you all at once, it's like your life gets handed to you just enough. To just the next thing that's kind of God dangles it down in front of your little nose, says, this is what's next. I don't want that one. Doesn't matter. Here it is. And one by one, I got handed the issues in my life. And one by one, I took those issues on. Now, I'm a guy, I'm out of step. I don't want to be out of step. I want for me pretty much what my dad always wanted for me. He thought I was nuts. He thought looked like I was volitionally trying to tear my life apart. If you would have told my father I wanted for me in life what he wanted for me in life, he would have said, oh, no. I wanted Bob to be a good college student. Bob wanted to drink. I wanted to be a good college student. It was important to me. God, my intentions when I went away to school was I was going to be just a hell of a college student. Every year when I went back to school, every week when I went back to school, every month when I went back. I can't tell you how I went to daily mass and communion, and confession. I had to go to confession or I couldn't go to communion. Every day but Sunday. You know how you're supposed to go on Sunday. Never went on Sunday. Just never knew where I was going to be on Sunday. But I was sitting at that damn campus last week, walking around there, just thinking of how many thousands of promises I made to myself. I remember one time I was in town and I was shocked. I was not in my dorm and I was with a woman, and a priest found me. I don't know how he found me. He called me at 9 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't been on campus in about a week. I picked up the telephone and he said, "Get your ass back to campus." Didn't say who he was, didn't say nothing. I just knew who that man was, and I got back to campus. And he sat me down in his dorm. I went back. It's kind of funny. I went back to make amends to that man. That man saved me from being thrown out a dozen times. And I went back to make amends, and he didn't remember who I was. He was an older priest. And you know how you hold that and you think how much damage, how unfair I was. And it was good for me to call this guy up and say, "Bob, Minnesota? Well, gee, there's a lot of kids. This is a big one on your list, And sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. But I remember I remember this is my senior year, and he's saying, go upstairs and study. And I'm saying it's too late. He says, it's not too late. Go upstairs and start. And I said, no, there's only, he wanted me to take the first step. And I knew it was too late. I mean, it was just gone. I was too far into the middle of the semester. There was no way I could have gone back and regained. Hell, all I had to do was drop about 3 courses and change what the hell I was doing. I could have graduated. But not me. I mean, I was too inflexible. I was caught in a pattern. I just couldn't do it. And a week later, I walked out of that school. I remember the confusion in his mind. He just couldn't understand why. He saw me walking right towards the brick wall, why I couldn't just turn left, And I couldn't. So one by one, as I started to go through in sobriety, I started to get my problems in my life handed to me. Issues with love, issues with work, issues with kids, issues with parenting, issues with Linda, issues with life. Okay? And as they came up to me, I tried to take them on and deal with them, and I started to fail. And I failed regularly. And by the time the second year they started to bother me, third year they started to bother me, fourth year they started to eat my lunch. Okay? Now I'm working at these things real hard, and it looks as if my life's getting worse, not better. And a lot of people in their second year of sobriety know a hell of a lot about what I'm talking about. I'll tell you, I don't know what it is. First year, there's like a honeymoon period of time, but there gets to be a stretch where it gets pretty damn daily and ordinary and awful, and it isn't quite as much fun. And you kind of understand the word trudge in a way that you had never understood it before when you listen to them talk about trudging the road of happy destiny. And I'm in front of these issues, and I'm at the club, and, a new guy walks in the club and gives me that horrible story that they have and tells me the problems they're having with the police and their job and their spouse and all that stuff. And I say, hey, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. Your first meeting, I'm glad you're here. And I'll say, as bad as it is, as crummy as it is, as horrible as it seems, it's going to be okay. Now, I know you don't have any idea how it's going to be okay, but it's going to be okay. You see that guy over there? God, his life was a mess, and he's 2 years sober, and boy, he's just knocking out of the park. I mean, he's just going to meetings 3 or 4 nights, and it's good. If you keep coming back, it's going to be good for you. Then I'd get in the car and I'd drive home and I'd say, when's it going to be okay for you, Bob? And I believed it. I could put my hand on a lie detector test where I told that man. I said, when's it going to, tonight after the meeting, Bob, your checking account was $200 overdrawn and you bought when they went out for coffee. You bought a sport coat on Tuesday for $200 and you owed $400 at the clothing store. When are you going to stop doing that stuff? When are you going to learn how to work? I mean, you may be exempt from work, Bob, but I think, God, I don't know. A lot of people have to work. I mean, you may have to learn how to work. I don't know. I mean, you might not, but, I mean, it looks right now as if you're going to have to learn. When are you going to learn how to spend money? When are you going to learn how to be a husband? When are you going to stop being angry with your kids? I didn't have any good answer. I didn't have a good answer. And by the 6th or 7th year, and the time isn't important. I was 23 years old when I came in. I think some of my immaturity had to do with chronology. Not all of it had to do with my alcoholism. Doesn't have to take you 6 or 7 years to go through. I've watched people deal with these issues. I've seen people who never had these issues. But I got in front of these at 7 years, and I just flat had to do something. You get to the point where you're either going to commit suicide or talk to your sponsor. You're never quite sure. You kind of never... Kind of flipping a coin. You know how how it is. You see them 3, 4, or 5 days a week, but, you thought maybe you just might let him know it wasn't exactly the way he perceived it. And I had been, it's funny, I had been, Warren is still my sponsor, and a man and Bill, my 2 sponsors. And Warren knew what was going on with my life. I mean, I was with him 4 days a week. And, but it never seemed like he really got it. I mean, I talked to Warren about work issues, and Warren said, oh, yeah, we all have those problems. No, and I'm saying, Warren, this is a work problem, I mean, he didn't get it. And and he's so laid back. I mean, he's just a wonderful, between the 2 of us, we're normal. I mean, he's just, I'm kind of aggressive and loaded up. You should have seen me. If you think I have any anxiety today, you should have seen me 25 years ago. I had a guy walk out of a meeting. He got up in the middle of the meeting, pointed at me, and he said, look at that guy. He's a nervous wreck. So if that's what this thing does to you, I don't want any part of it, and he walked out. I promise you. Scouts on it. And I went, so I've got these issues. My life's falling apart. I knew what the answer was. The answer was to find a God of your very own understanding. And the problem with finding God, there's a few issues with I've been looking for God all my life. And I've been looking for him in my church. I got to a certain point in my church, and I had to stop looking for him in my church because I couldn't be a member living the way I live. The rules were, if you want to be a full participant, follow these rules. Couldn't follow the rules, wasn't a full participant. So now I'm in AA, and I'm starting to do the steps that I'm doing. And I figured, all my life, that's kind of close. I'm kind of like you. I mean, I got a lot of similarities, but I'm different. Clancy talks about if you wanted to have a flag that we could all pledge our allegiance to, the flag would say, but I'm different. Okay? See, we build a wall between ourselves and the rest of the world so the rest of the world can't see the unattractive, lousy, insufficient things about us. I built a wall up between you and me so you couldn't see what was going on in my life. The thinking that goes on behind the wall says you like me, but you only like what I let you see about me. But if you could see everything about me, all the dark, dirty, lousy, unattractive, and insufficient things about me, you'd hate me. Because I hate me. Who knows more what a lousy, insufficient person I am than me? I'm walking around comparing my insides with your outsides. The only way you come out doing that is second best. But at some point in time, behind the wall, you get sick enough, tired enough, hurt enough that you say, hey, come and get me. I don't care where you are. Just come and get me and help me not be who I am anymore. It's the only reason I came to AA. I couldn't stand me. Didn't know what an alcoholic was. Didn't know if I was one. I just couldn't stand me. I tore my wall down. When I was sober 3 months, I took a fourth and fifth step. For the first time in my life, I shared the whole deck of cards with someone. I never had shared my whole life with anybody. With the peace you didn't have. You'd come to me and you'd say, Bob, I think you should do this. I think this is your problem. And I see how you think that. You don't even know about my gambling. You don't know about my sex life. You know about my work, you know my wife, you know my family, but you don't know about these two pieces. If you knew about those two pieces, you'd think differently. So thanks a lot for your concern. Why don't you just get off my back? Now, I wouldn't say that out loud. Out loud, I'd say, yeah, I think you're right. And, but I'd neutralize you with the peace you didn't have. But when I came to AA and I finally took my fifth step, I tore that wall down, shared my whole life. For the first time in my life, I made a discovery. The discovery was I'm not unique. My personality may be unique, but not my illness, not my behavior, not my experience, not my feeling. For the first time in my life, I started to have a sense of hope that maybe what worked in your life could work in mine. So that's how I felt in my first year of sobriety. I felt a sense of hope and that I had never had in my life up to that point. But then over the next 5 or 6 years, I started to lose it because, you see, I'm very much like you, but maybe I'm just a little bit different. So maybe when I started to be 3 and 4 and 5 years sober and the issues of gambling got to be more significant and the issues with anger got to be more significant and the issue with money maybe I'm not just an alcoholic. Maybe I got some other issues that are going on that makes me different than you. So I'm sober 5 and 6 and 7 years, going to 5 and 6 and 7 meetings a week, sitting in meetings, wondering whether, what's wrong with me? Why am I different? Why am I always the guy that's a great starter and a poor finisher? Why did I go down from my high school class with 14 guys? I had the best grades of the guys who went down. I was the only man out of the 14 who didn't finish. What is that about you, Bob? If we had a race, a foot race, for a mile, I'm a guy who I'd show up with a great pair of shorts and a good pair of tennis shoes and a nice little shirt, and I'd look and talk and sound like a racer. And you'd know that, that guy from Minnesota, I think he's won some race up there. It sounds like he's pretty good. Should be up for the first 4 or 5 in the race. And when the race take off for the first third of the race, I'd be in the first 4 or 5. But somewhere between halfway and a third through the race, or halfway and 3/4 of the race, I'd fall down. I'd hold my leg. Everybody gets to the finish line and say, what happened to that guy from Minnesota? I say, I don't know. I must have pulled a hamstring when he came around the corner. He was doing pretty good. Too bad. I don't know. It must have been an accident, but it wasn't an accident. If you would have followed me around in life in a helicopter, you could have guessed within 50 feet when I would have fallen down. I never finish anything. I got the equipment. I got a goal. I start things. I always look pretty good when I do it, but I don't finish anything. And I got in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started out, and I was the youngest kid in our group for 2 years, and I got a lot of attention, I got a lot of support, I had wonderful men and women who were my teachers, and I started out like a gang. I was active in sober, I was stark raving sober. I was everywhere. I was on every committee and doing all that sort of stuff. I sounded better when I was sober 3 years than I sound now. And had more answers, I'll tell you. But I'm having these issues and problems, and I'm starting to feel different, and all of a sudden I'm starting to take a step back, and I'm thinking, no, this is just going to be another place where you're going to fail. You are different. And I'm sober 6 and 7 years, and I'm telling you that I'm in a dangerous spot when I'm sober 6 or 7 years. Now, the answer is to find a God and to change your act. Okay? The people who I know that really lived their lives, that had the kind of peace and serenity that I wanted, they had a relationship with God that I did not understand. It was sound, and it was spiritual, and it was profound. Now, the problem with that is you go knock on the door, and God says, God, who's there? And you say, God is Bob. God's going to say, what do you want? I say, well, it's not working. I am busting my britches, and it is absolutely not working. My life's a mess. But from what I can see, the people who got it together have a better deal going with you than I got. I'd like to change my deal with you. God's going to say, fine. And I'm going to say, okay, God, what do I do? He's going to say, well, quit gambling. Get up in the morning. Go to work. Don't spend more money than you make. Be kind and loving to your wife and be nice to your children. I mean, hell, if I know how to do that, I wouldn't need God. No, but what's the use of developing a relationship with God if you can't fulfill the conditions of the relationship? So my idea was, as soon as I get my act cleaned up, I'm going to have a relationship with God. But how? I mean, you can't have a relationship with God until you get your act cleaned up. Was kind of my twisted or goofy way of thinking. And first of all, I found out that no one's got their act totally cleaned up. So that was one of the things that I had wrong. And there's lots of people who have good relationship with God that are quite imperfect. I had this black and white kind of little boxes that I put things in at that point in time in my life, and it seemed to me that I had to clean my act. So I was caught in a trap. I didn't know how to get out of the trap. So the only thing I knew how to do, I went back to the steps. I went back to step 1, sober 7 years, and found out what powerlessness and unmanageability meant to me at that point in time. Had no problem understanding that I was powerless, that my life was unmanageable. Believe me. I'm in as much debt at 8 years of sobriety as I did when I walked in the front door of AA, and I paid it off. I came to step 2, and I've always believed step 2 for us corporately. I just didn't believe it for me individually. You can put my hand on the lie detector test and say, do you believe God's going to restore us to sanity? Answer, yes. Needle doesn't move a bit. Put your hand on the thing and say, do you believe God's going to restore Bob Bazan to sanity? At 8 years, that needle would have been all over the map. Because it looked to me like I was getting worse. I want to report to you I was not getting worse. What happened is I was getting more honest. I was getting more in touch with things. You were getting me just well enough that I wasn't able to stuff and deny the things in my life that weren't working, and they were right in front of my nose. And I was right on the verge of having to deal with them, and that was progress. I don't know why it is drunks make a discovery about what doesn't work in our life and we feel bad. Because we've discovered something that doesn't work. I mean, the rest of the world, I'm going to tell that joke you asked me to stop telling 15 years ago, and I stopped telling it to what the woman who goes to the doctor and says, doctor, I have this problem. The doctor says, what's wrong? She says, I pass gas. She says, there's no sound and there's no smell, but I get this horrible sensation, this flatulence, and I wish you'd give me it. The doctor says, give her some medicine. She says, take this and come back in a week. She takes it and come back in a week, and he said, how's the problem? She said, oh, it's worse. He said, now you can smell it. And he said, well, good. Now that we have your nose cleared up, we can work on your hearing. I have not always known what the issue and problem is. I went back to the second step, and I had to come to believe that God would restore Bob Bazan to sanity. And the way I came to believe that is I believed it by looking at you. I watched the miracles God was working in you. I had people I was sponsoring that were making more progress than I was making. And there's always some newcomer that comes in that would walk through walls. I mean, thank God for that person whose life is just totally destroyed. We have a lot of kids who come up to our area for treatment, and a lot of them stay. And it's been a wonderful thing for me because I've had some business issues the last number of years that have caused me some problems, and I have a tendency every once in a while to feel sorry for myself, and it's almost impossible to feel sorry for yourself next to people who are starting their lives over. It's just a privilege to be in a meeting watching these people take on circumstances that are twice as difficult as you, and with a smile on their face, with a dignity, and they're going for it, and you feel like a schmuck that you're complaining about, your ingrown toenail or your sprained ankle or whatever the hell it is, and you got some man or woman that's, stretching out there. So I had to come to believe that God would restore me to sanity, and I came to believe that by reopening up my eyes in Alcoholics Anonymous. I took the third step on my knee with my sponsor in his office. I hadn't done that before, but I did. I took a fourth step, I took a fifth step, and I said, Tommy, when I'm done with this fifth step, be careful, because whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do. I said, I'm in a lot of pain, and I think it's unnecessary that I'm in as much pain as I'm in, and I'm ready to change. When I was done, one of the things he wanted me to do was go to an industrial psychologist. I can't tell you how much I didn't want any outside help. It seemed like saying the program didn't work or I didn't work, but I promised him I would, and I did, and got in touch with some stuff that was very helpful for me, and I was able to bring back in my program and work on it. But not too awfully long after I took my fifth step, I had been home in my house, and it had been a lousy day. I mean, it had been a day where I hadn't done anything I wanted to do and done a whole bunch of things I didn't want to do, and one of those days where I got up late, got to work late, left early, went downtown, played backgammon all afternoon, missed dinner, missed the meeting, came home, yelled at the kids, and got in a fight with Linda. One of those days where you'd like to have them kind of videotape about an hour and a half and send it to the General Service Office to show what 8 years of sobriety can do for you. I thought maybe I could be a poster child, just want to let you know how I'm doing. And I'm sitting in my chair, I'm doing some spiritual reading, and I'm saying, gee, it happened again. I say, what do you mean it happened again? Weren't you there? I mean, you sound like you're watching your life on television. I say, well, it's kind of like I do go, almost like I go into a blackout. It's kind of like it's automatic. It's like it's in a groove. There's so much habit in it that it's almost as if I don't choose. And all of a sudden I realized that was a bunch of crap. My life was exactly the way it was because I designed it to be exactly the way it was. I sounded like a guy who wanted to change it, but I didn't want to change it. I wanted to keep on doing the things I was doing and not have the problems. I wanted to gamble as much as I wanted to gamble, whenever I wanted to gamble, and not have money problems. Sounded like a guy who wanted to get his finances in shape, and that was a bunch of crap. I wanted to spend as much money whenever I wanted to spend it and not have money problems. Sounded like I wanted to have a good marriage and have Linda's love, and the truth was what I wanted to do is I wanted her love without spending time with her. Sounded like I wanted to be a good father, and I wanted to have my kids' love and affection without spending time with them. My life was goofed up, and I had a bunch of... My life was the way it was because I was exactly what my commitments were. I was committed to doing what I wanted to do, and it wasn't working. That night I realized that I had tried as hard as I knew how to try to clean my act up, and I had failed, and I realized that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I was given the opportunity to take the sixth and the seventh step of the program of AA. The sixth step said we were entirely ready to have God remove our defects of character, and the seventh step said that we humbly ask Him to remove our shortcoming. I had spent 8 years trying to get rid of my defects of character. I don't have the power to get rid of my defects of character. I'm responsible and I'm a player. I need to cooperate, but I don't have the power. If I had the power to get rid of my defects of character, I wouldn't need you and I wouldn't need the meetings. I'd just change it. I've always known what to do. I just have never had the power to do it. You know how we change in Alcoholics Anonymous? Farmer doesn't grow. Plants a seed, creates a fertile environment. Plants a seed, creates an environment which growth can take place, and God grows. Doctor doesn't heal. He creates an aseptic environment, creates an atmosphere in which healing can take place, and God heals, and we don't change. We create an atmosphere in which change can take place, and God changes us. The atmosphere is an atmosphere of surrender. The power that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous, surrender. The power is a weakness. That's what the power is. One time Chamberlain was down here at the Peachford conference, there was some conference in alcoholism that's down here that it's an old, respected, people come from all over the United States, all over the world to go to it. And Chamberlain didn't go to very many things that was out of AA, but he went to that one. And I remember when he got out of it, people were kind of curious what Chuck would have said. And Chuck C. was a guy he was Richard Chamberlain's dad, and he was a California guy. He's been dead for about 8 or 9 years. And he was wonderful in AA. And he got out of that conference, and another guy looked at him and said, Chuck, what did you think of the conference? And he said they don't seem to know much about surrender. I've never seen a person in one sentence draw the difference between most of the field of alcoholism and between Alcoholics Anonymous, what the business is. Our business is a spiritual business. Our issue is surrender. Surrender is what gets us open enough so we can start putting those principles in action in our lives. That day, in my living room that night, I surrendered again. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I gave you my alcoholism and everything I thought related to it. I never took another drink. If I didn't give you my sex life, I didn't give you my business, I didn't give you my marriage, I didn't give you my kids. I thought you'd get me well and I'll handle it. I mean, that's what I thought it was. The truth is that the compartments of my life that I did not incorporate into my spiritual life and incorporate into the program were unmanageable and were messy. Before that night, I used to have about 18 things to do every day, the ability to do 14, and I got 9 done. I was like that guy driving down the street in a panel truck, and about every 2 or 3 blocks he'd get out and he'd bang on the truck with the broom. Finally, someone who's following him got out of the truck and said, "What in the hell are you doing? I mean, every 2 or 3 blocks you get out and you beat on the..." He says, "Yeah, you see that truck?" He says, "Yeah, it's just a 1-ton truck." He said, "I know." He said, "I got 2 tons of canaries in it." He said, "I got to keep half of them in the air at all times so I can't drive the truck." That was my life. That was my life. Okay. I mean, we have a capacity for suffering. You know how to tell the difference between an alcoholic and a normal person? You know, you put a normal person and an alcoholic in a room, you go out that door out there, and there's a person with a baseball bat that will hit you over the head. You go out that door over there, and there's happiness forever after. An alcoholic will get up and go out that door, or a non-alcoholic will get up and go over that door, get hit on top of the head, get knocked down, and come back in. Then they'll get up and they'll go out that door, and they'll have happiness forever after. An alcoholic will get up and go over to that door, open up, get hit on top of the head, and get knocked down, and come back in. Then they'll get up and they'll go over to that door, and they'll open it up, and they'll get hit on top of the head and get knocked down and come back in. Then they'll get up and they'll go over to that door, and they'll open it up and get hit on top of the head. They'll get up and get hit on top. And one day they will go there, and the person with the baseball bat will be missing, so they go looking for him. That night, out of fear of having my life remain exactly the way it was, I became entirely ready to having God remove my defects of character, and 5 of the major issues I was dealing with in my life disappeared. Changed. We're gone. So I had to cooperate with them. Whenever you make a major change in your life, you're going to have a chance to find out if you really mean it. I'm a guy who's always going to go on a diet. When I go on a diet, the very first thing I do is I go buy some Haagen-Dazs and some cookies. Well, it's the last day I'm going to eat. I mean, it is. And it's already been a crappy day, or I wouldn't be going on a diet. And all I'm going to do is just finish the day off. And then I'm going to lose 30 or 40 pounds, and it'll be okay. Now, if you understand, if you have any understanding of that kind of thinking, you have made a number of commitments in your life which you have not been able to follow through on. And I made a lot of promises about gambling, a lot of promises about parenting, a lot of promises about money, a lot of promises about work, and never been able to keep them. That night was different. That night I surrendered. I hired someone to get me up in the morning. I had someone call me who I respected enough. You know, I never missed a trip. I never missed a handball game. I just missed work. So I had someone call me up. I turned the finances over to my wife. My wife does not have the ego issues with money that I have. She had this new scientific technique where she could pay 1/3 of a bill. I mean, it was the damnedest thing I'd ever heard of. You know? Oh! And we started, and I got on an allowance, and we started to get that in order. I started dating my wife. I dated my wife for 17 years every Friday night. And, you know, that night she's got my undivided attention. And when I'm not in town on Friday night, we do it on one other night of the week. So I never wanted to go out with my wife alone. I had her love and affection. It was everybody else's love and affection I wanted. But I had to learn how to be with my wife. I had to learn how to go back and establish a romantic atmosphere. That's a real, live, dangerous state, okay? And that has been one of the best things we have ever done. She knows that once a week, and no one else goes out on that. It's just the 2 of us. And that has been, an important part of our life. I have spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars learning about trying to be a parent. I think being a parent, I saw a pin the other day, is having kids is like having a bowling alley installed in your head. It is, I think being a parent takes about 125% of whatever you got. It's just an enormous privilege, but it's an enormous responsibility, and it's a hell of a deal. And today I have a good relationship with my kids. Still one of those most stretching areas of my life. But I'm self-supporting through my own contributions today. I have no issue about knowing, I made appointments to go to work. I made appointments to stay to work. And I'll tell you, within 6 months of that night, I was making as much in a month as I was making in the previous year, and I've never had a month where I've made less than that in the 17 years until the last 2 years. What's my life like today? I'm in love with my wife today. We have a good marriage. We have 3 children. We have a 23-year-old son who's living in Spain with 5 years of sobriety, working at the embassy. We have a 21-year-old who's got almost 2 years of sobriety. I can't tell you how painful it was for us to have children with the disease. I didn't want my kids to have the disease. Never put my kids in Alateen. I thought, I'm sober and they shouldn't have any issues. We're lucky. We got blessed with this thing. They hadn't lived through the alcoholism, but, they lived through the assholism, I'll tell you. They may not have lived through excuse my language, but, I tell you something. I can't tell you how important it was for me to clean up my act in my own home. The measure every once in a while, AA has gotten so big and it's everywhere. And you can spend your whole life in AA. Every once in a while, you hear someone talk about what's it mean to be a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they'll give you the how many meetings you got to go to, and how many people you got to sponsor, and how many whatever the hell you have to do, and that's not the measure of how to be a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's part of it. But you should be able to go to someone's house and say, "Is it better in your house because of your being an Alcoholics Anonymous?" You should be able to go to someone's work. Should be able to go to their neighbors. Should be able to go to their spouse. It's supposed to make a difference of how you are in the world, not just how you are in meetings. And it does have something to do with sponsoring people. It does have something to do with meetings, and it has to do with putting those steps into action in your life. Today, my life is okay. That person who didn't know how to work started a business with a guy, and we got it up to 400 employees, and it was a wonderful deal. The bad news is it was in the real estate business. In about 5 years, they changed the laws on us. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been struggling like you can't believe. For the last 3 or 4 years, I have not known if my company was going to make it or I was going to make it. I lived in an atmosphere of literally hanging on the edge with my fingernails. I am now making a third to a fourth of what I made on a steady basis. I have a chance to find out how caught up in materialism I was. I couldn't believe it. You would have asked me, so are you materialistic? I said, oh, kind of, but, I'm real active in AA. I got good spiritual orientation, kind of. I want you to know that a lot of the financial problems I thought I solved, I didn't solve. I just made so damn much money, it didn't make any difference. Okay. But on the way down, I started to find out how much those things meant to me, how much of my ego and my identity I had tied up in things, how much of my power that when I wanted to do something, you want to go spend $2,000, you want to go spend $1,000, I could just snap my fingers and go make it. That's ego. Lots of those decisions I made, I shouldn't have made. They're wrong decisions, but I was a big shot and I could go do what I wanted to do. And then you start finding out when you start getting back with the B word, the budget word, getting my wife back involved in the finances and getting back on Mr. Big Shot's back on a budget, and life changes a little bit, and you start getting in touch with your values, and I've had to change some of my values and take a look at some of my behavior, and I'm back, and I've got some things in front of my nose that I haven't had in front of my nose for a long time. And today, I still don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. I've got a large company involved in real estate, and real estate's still pretty gamey, and I don't know what I've got that's going to work and exactly what I got that isn't going to work, but, it's little by little, it's getting better, but I tell you, I have had to find out what it's like to live without knowing how it's going to be. And I have had a better program in the last 2 or 3 years than I think I had the preceding 10 years. I had to go through a period where I was enormously depressed. I took all of this personally. When you have a big ego, everything looks like it has to do with you. And some of it had to do with me. I had to find out. I want to find out what pieces of this I screwed up. Because believe me, I don't want to go through this school again. I want to learn the lesson, but I do not want to go back to this school. This school has not been as much fun the last 3 or 4 years. But if it never gets any better than it is right now, it's just going to be fine. Because I got my sobriety, I got my program, I've got my wife, I've got my children's, and it's okay. It really is okay. William and I were talking about that last night. William just had a kid. We went over to the hospital. We talked about all the things that we're worried about. And you walk through a children's ward in a hospital, and most of the things that you're worried about, you almost can't get out of your damn mouth walking by a children's ward in a hospital. They aren't important. They just aren't important. Today, if you ask me if I believe that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous can handle any issue or difficulty in your life, my answer is yes. I think if you put those principles into action in your life, you have an opportunity to be better and have your life be of better quality and for you to be more well than you ever would have been had you never had the disease of alcoholism. The bad news is you got a disease that if you don't deal with it, it's going to kill you, it's going to take you down and 5 or 6 people in your life down, it's going to destroy everything you got. The good news is that in order to get well, you have to learn how to live. I mean, we're forced to find the answer. I mean, it's a privilege. I mean, you've heard people say, I'm glad I'm an alcoholic, and you wondered why anybody would ever say that. And I say that because I have been forced to put principles in action in my life that I would otherwise not have put in action in my life because I am, by nature, lazy. And because of putting them in action in my life has a dimension to it that it would not have had I never had to find you. I thank you for my life, for the quality that my life has, because it wouldn't have had that quality if you had not given me the tools that you gave me. I congratulate you on your anniversary, and thank you very much for having me.